And welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, a last-ditch effort by anti-Trump forces to block his nomination failed at the U.S. Republican Convention, but deep tensions show that party unity is fast fraying. Will the Republicans survive this storm? And as the World Heritage Committee grants China's Shenlongjia Forest Reserve UNESCO status, authorities brace themselves for measures against the tourism damage. But will Mother Nature prevail? And we begin today's show with the U.S. Republican Convention. Republican Donald Trump will be officially announced as the party's nominee for this year's U.S. presidential election. Before the convention, Mr. Trump has selected the Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his running mate, seen as a move to bolster support inside the party. The controversial figure has been facing strong resistance inside the party, but his Republican opposites seem to have no choice but stand by him. Or do they? Let's take a look.
Deeply divided.
We're going to win so big.
With Donald Trump having won over a majority of the delegates, an official announcement of him to be the nominee is expected. Ahead of the convention, Trump officially named Mike Pence as his vice presidential running mate.
Would you join me in thanking Donald Trump, Melania, and his entire family for the sacrifices that they are making to make America great again?
As a well-known social and evangelical conservative, Pence's participation is seen as a bridge for Trump to reach some powerful donors in the party. Still, the voices of opposing forces were heard. Some delegates angrily left the convention floor. Others declared they would not back Trump.
We delegates were being shut up. Our voices are not being heard because it's a rigged convention. It's a rigged convention. They didn't want us to have any say-so on these rules whatsoever.
However, some delegates say that though they didn't vote for Trump in the primaries, they will now.
It's a choice between Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And for me, that's an easy choice.
Trump's proposal to ban Muslims and his pledge to build a wall between the U.S. and Mexico has angered many people. Even a short walk from the convention site, several hundred protesters gathered.
Capitalism. That's the problem. That's the problem, capitalism. That breeds racism. Mr. Trump can't do nothing about racism.
I have a real fear of being put in a camp or being hunted down and killed by a white supremacist group.
Donald Trump is set to speak on Thursday to accept the nomination before an unconventional mix of politicians, sports personalities, and entertainers. But what's going to happen in the election showdown this year between Trump and Clinton is still not clear.
And for more on the Republican Convention, I'm joined here in the Beijing studio, Rick Dunham, co-director of the Global Business Journalism Program at Tsinghua University. He, of course, was formerly the Washington, D.C. bureau chief of Houston Chronicle and covered many U.S. presidential elections. Welcome to our program. Meanwhile, joining us in the Beijing studio, Professor Qi Ye, who is the director of the Brookings Tsinghua Center for Public Policy. Welcome as well, Professor.
Good to be with you.
So, what do you make of it? Is this really, as they say, the most divided Republican convention ever since the 1990s?
I think it's divided. I think the party is deeply divided, both culturally and ideologically. But I would say that this is not the most divided. It's been divided a lot worse before. 1976 was almost evenly divided between President Ford and his challenger Ronald Reagan. 1964, Barry Goldwater, like Trump, had the convention, but he didn't have the hearts of most Republicans.
Mm-hmm. So it seems 1964 is more relevant in this case.
Yes, exactly.
What do you make of it, Professor Qi, coming from afar?
Well, it's certainly extremely divided, not only for the Republican Party, but also overall in this general campaign of the nation. Even though we see it within the Democrats, we see a huge unity, but overall we see this general campaign is very much divided. In between the people who are for the establishment and the people who are against the establishment.
Yes, indeed. That's also reflected in the Democrat Party as well. Having said that, though, let's still focus on the Republicans. We understand there has been a lot of debates about racial issues, and with some of the recent shootings of the police incidents, that seem to be most of the events taking attention. Has Mr. Trump, Mr. Zhang, doing a good job addressing the problem, at least over the past few days, involving some of the most recent events?
Well, a good job is going to depend on whether you're talking
That's
political.
Right.
Is it good for him politically? I would say he's been inconsistent. His campaign is trying to take advantage of white anger, sort of a backlash against the Black Lives Matter movement. At the same time, he is supported by a number of white supremacists and extremists. And even yesterday, during the first day of the convention, a Republican congressman talked about how white Europeans had led the world in culture since the beginning of civilization. This is not the way to unite people.
We have also seen among the speakers being chosen during the Republican National Convention, of course, by the Trump side, are some African American speakers. And they are talking about not just Black Lives Matter, but rather using the term and change it to Blue Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter is a social movement going on in the United States, so-called protecting the African Americans against the brutality as what they see from the police. But of course, Blue Lives Matter, here they are referring to protecting the police. So when you have those speakers coming in, are they really bringing the party together or likely to bring the situation even worse?
Well, I happen to think that one of the speakers you're talking about, who is a law enforcement officer, was an effective speaker. But I don't think he's going to convince Black Democrats to go Republican. I think what he does mostly is that he convinces Republicans who favor Trump that it's not racist to believe that the police lives matter as well as African American lives.
Professor Qi, what do you think? Will the day-to-day events, as we have talked about, the racial issue has been fired up inside major cities across the United States, but will day-to-day issues like this really influence the final result of a party nomination and even the final result of the presidential election?
I think the recent development is really tragic, not only for the victims, for the both the police and the other dead during this terrible tragic instance. I also think it's tragic really for the overall society, and I think here we need to make a distinction in between how the politicians handle this, long, deeply rooted problems, and the case when during the campaign, how the candidates dealing with this. The distinction need to be made. Right now, it's really hard to predict, any particular instance will affect the overall result of the campaign. But I think it would be even more tragic if politicians to make this to their advantage just for the election purpose.
Well, I guess that's something that is happening right now when it comes to a presidential election cycle. We are now joined now from Cleveland, Ohio, Mr. Brandon Andrews, former U.S. Senate staff and now director of Impact. Mr. Andrews, welcome to our program. You are in Cleveland. You saw what happened. So what do you make of it? The most divided day, and what to do with the most important issue of the day, the racial issues?
Well, first, what we saw yesterday in Cleveland is evidence that the party is beginning to coalesce around Donald Trump, but evidence that there are still leading members of the Republican Party and, of course, members across the country that do not yet support Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump has an opportunity this week to bring more folks into the fold and hopefully get them behind them, but he hasn't done it yet. And I think the fact that the request for a roll call vote on the floor yesterday was squashed more so by the RNC, by the Republican National Committee, than by the Trump campaign, will lead to issues in the future. Senator Mike Lee of Utah is a conservative. So is Ken Cuccinelli, who's the former Attorney General from the state of Virginia. These folks aren't supporting Trump, but they also were against some of the Rules Committee changes. And so for them, this was about 2020 and 2024 as much or more than it was about Donald Trump's candidacy.
Well,
now,
Mr. Andrews, I have to jump in here because those might be sporadic cases. But what we are talking about is the major trend of the party. The question is, when earlier the establishments were not around Mr. Trump, they were not rallied around him. Now, Mr. Trump has pretty much been embarrassed over the first day of the National Convention. But after that, what's likely to happen? Will people eventually rally with the banner of the Republican Party and eventually support this candidate, even if it is Donald Trump? Or you see the issue has become such a severe one, no matter what happened, Mr. Trump is pretty much on his own, at least to a certain extent.
Well, I think a lot of Republicans, Democrats, independents in this country have already made their decision about Donald Trump, and there's not a whole lot he's going to be able to do to sway those folks. However, I will say, if you look at the latest CNN poll, so voters that had voted for another Republican candidate in the primary, their likelihood of voting for Donald Trump has increased by 8 or 9% over the past month. So Donald Trump has been able to bring in some members of the Republican Party who did not support him during the primary season. He certainly has more work to do, and certainly has much more work to do when you talk about young people in America, when you talk about folks from communities of color. I think he has 15% of the Hispanic vote, which is half of what Mitt Romney had at a similar point. And when you talk about the African American community, he literally has 0% in the state of Ohio and in the state of Pennsylvania. And of course, those two states are incredibly important for his strategy if he's going to be able to beat Hillary Clinton in November. And one of the reasons that folks from communities of color are not supporting Donald Trump is because of his rhetoric around these police-involved shootings and around criminal justice reform. Now, believe it or not, there are... Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk and also ask the question. We can see, as you said, sir, Donald Trump is not necessarily winning the hearts and minds of many, and yet we still see some huge chance for him to win even at the end of the day. If you take a look at some of the recent polls, he's closely behind Hillary Clinton in most of the battleground states. Of course, there's an issue of what do you term as closely behind. According to a new NBC News poll and Wall Street Journal poll, on the eve of the GOP convention, Hillary Clinton was leading at the 46% to Trump's 41%. Plus, both candidates are facing sizable disadvantages and challenges ahead of their own party conventions. In saying that, Clinton maintains a 5-point national lead over Trump. Of course, those 5%, there could be some margin differences when it comes to polls, and people could switch their position quite differently leading up to the election. But Mr. Dunham, what do you make of what Mr. Andrews just said?
Well, I think a key point that he was making is that Donald Trump is spending the week of his convention trying to consolidate his Republican vote, to bring Republicans who are suspicious of him into the fold. Conventions are supposed to be when you reach out to voters in the middle, the undecided voters, and it's a sign of fundamental weakness when you're doing that. I think the unifying factor for Donald Trump and Republicans is Hillary Clinton, and to a lesser extent Barack Obama. And I think what Trump did not do well today at the convention was to present a compelling case against Hillary Clinton. He has to present a case for himself. but he needs to use the convention like George Bush did in 2004 against John Kerry to show why the other person should not be elected, as well as why they should be elected.
Will he be able to do that, Mr. Trump, when he does not yet come up with his own plan of how to deal with some of the thorny issues facing the United States, whether it's internal issues such as racial issue or external issues such as foreign policies? Professor Qi, what do you think?
I think between now and November, there is approximately 100 days. 100 days is a long time for a volatile campaign like this. So I think Trump does have opportunity, use the convention and use the time in between now and November to really come up with a working strategy, to redefine these issues, redefine himself. I think this is still the uncertainty, the level of uncertainty is very high, and for both candidates.
Mr. Andrews, what do you make of it? For the very efficient Chinese, they think 100 days are enough to come up with something very meaningful. Do you think the Trump campaign would be able to do that? By the way, they've been changing campaign managers over the past few weeks. Does that really work? Does it really help people to see a clear policy line, or at least a clearer policy line?
Well, we haven't seen a clear policy line from Mr. Trump at all, and I don't expect to see that at all at the RNC convention this week in Cleveland. What Trump is doing is rolling out his family members, starting with his wife, Melania, yesterday evening, who gave the initial primetime speech, and his children will give speeches today and tomorrow, and then of course Donald Trump will give his speech on Thursday evening. However, I don't expect there to be anything more substantive in those speeches than we've heard previously. I expect the week to be filled with anecdotes about Donald Trump, about his personality, about his readiness for the job, about his composure, softening his character a bit, but I don't expect to see anything substantive in terms of policy. Something that he could do, obviously, is say that Black lives do matter. He could come out and talk about some of the racial injustice that's in the justice system. He could come out and talk about some of the police-involved shootings, and he could also talk about some of the other issues, whether they be foreign policy or the economy. Donald Trump actually is leading Hillary Clinton in the latest CNN poll in terms of trustworthiness around the economy and terrorism, which are the top two issues for voters. So he can talk about issues without having a substantive plan. I don't think that the substantive plan is going to come for quite some time. And that's going to give, unfortunately, Hillary Clinton an opportunity.
Mr. Dunham, let me ask you this. What kind of Republican convention is this? Is this a Republican convention to rally the party, or is this a Republican convention to barbecue the possible candidates?
Well, I think it's a Republican convention that has to happen because they always have them.
Right.
I think Donald Trump would be much more into a big Las Vegas show, one night only, but this is the way it always is done. And so he's doing something that's a little uncharacteristic, and I think he's a bit uncomfortable with the whole way it's done. But I think what they need more is some really strong speakers and really strong themes. The first day it was all over the place. They have to have, even though they say they have a theme of the day, it wasn't the first day. They need to stick to it and give strong, sharp speeches.
Having said that, though, we've been talking about the technical issues involving Donald Trump's campaign and what would that mean, the current stage for the future. But one thing we have to be very interested in, because eternally, that is the most important thing. That is, what's going to happen to the Republican Party? We see a party extremely divided. We see the establishment of the Republican Party are strongly against a possible candidate. Well, it seems that the grassroots of that party has been providing strong support for that possible candidate, namely Donald Trump. So what's going to happen in the future? I think that is an interesting question. Professor Qi, from a Chinese perspective, the Republican Party has been dealing with China quite frequently. After all, China and the United States established diplomatic relations when the Republican Party was in the White House.
That's true.
But of course, that doesn't mean one country is closer to one party, not necessarily close to the other. But still, Republican Party is a very interesting and important political party to the U.S.-China relations. So, Professor Qi, what do you make of it?
Well, I think what's happening, this division and this conflicts not only exist in the Republican Party, but also we see that in the first half of the campaign during the Democratic Party as well, when Bernie Sanders, versus Hillary Clinton, we see that. I think this really provided a moment for both parties to reflect. Now we're in a very, very different time, and therefore there has to be a different party to adapt to this new, new age of the politics and the society.
Right.
Right. I think for China, it doesn't really matter that much whether or not it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and China will emphasize on the strategic issues with either the president or of the United States rather than with the individual party.
Mr. Andrews, we see quite an opposition toward one another, as Professor Chi just mentioned. Inside the United States, also reflected by the Brexit vote referendum in the UK as well. The so-called establishment vis-a-vis the grassroots or populism. So what do you make of this new political change around the world? What would that mean for the Republican Convention, a few days to go only, and also the Republican Party? Will they be able to renew themselves through this process, whether they support or not Donald Trump?
Well, when you talk about Brexit, we just had a new PM be put forth in the UK from a conservative party, and so you have to expect the Republican Party in the United States to have another friend on the world stage. However, there's been a decade-long schism between conservatives in the Republican Party and so-called establishment members of the Republican Party. As aforementioned, I think the lack of a roll call vote on the rules exacerbated that, because you had conservatives, Mike Lee again and Ken Cuccinelli from Virginia, leading the charge on the floor, and you had the RNC, the Republican National Committee, and Reince Priebus being seen as squashing that. And there's some discrepancy about how that actually happened and whether or not signatures were actually counted and votes were actually counted in the right way. So Republican Party certainly has some healing to do going forward. But the thing here is, neither the establishment nor the conservatives actually are overwhelmingly supportive of Donald Trump's candidacy. Donald Trump has kind of been able to build a new coalition of moderates, of independents, and yes, he's pulled some folks from the establishment and from the conservative wing of the party. However, neither wing of the party, if you talk about establishment versus conservative, is happy with the Trump candidacy, but neither have been able to, they've not been able to unite and actually push him out in time to put forth someone else for the convention.
That is really
certainly a lot of answers.
That is really an interesting point. Before we go to you, Mr. Duncan, so who will decide the future of the Republican Party? I think that is the issue.
American voters will decide.
Well, it's politically correct for you to say that.
I'm saying if Trump loses, if Trump wins, he wins the battle. If Trump loses, the battle is 4 years from now. Two huge divides. One is the internationalist wing, the Reagan-Bush wing, versus the isolationist America First wing, which is Trump, and the other is the populist wing, which is Trump, versus the pro-business, big business Republican wing, which has been dominant since 1960.
Wow, there's a lot of things going on right there. Certainly, every meeting and every day count when it comes to how the party will go from here and where the election is going to lead us to eventually for your country. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Learned a lot. Rick Dunham, Brandon Andrews, and Chi Ye. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you. Stay with us here on World Inside. We got our final segment coming right up. As China's Shenlongjia Forest Reserve makes the prestigious UNESCO World Heritage List, local authorities prepare to step up protection measures. Can nature remain untouched? Welcome back. You're watching World Inside on CCTV News. Now we turn to the World Heritage List. The 40th session of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee has added the natural heritage Shenlongjia Forestry District in Hubei Province on the list of World Heritages with 28 other sites this year. This recent addition brings the total number of Chinese sites on the list to 50 after Italy's 51. This is seen as a recognition for Shenlongjia Forestry District's heritage preservation efforts. But the challenge of preserving the natural site and protecting its biological diversity, given its great reputation, lies ahead. Let's take a look.
The announcement was made on Sunday at the 40th session of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee in Istanbul, Turkey. The head of the Shenlongjia Nature Reserve's delegation says he's delighted with the site's successful application and adds that this milestone is an example of how China has gained global recognition for its heritage preservation efforts. We completed our application for being listed as a World Heritage Site based on international standards, so we have made great progress. This successful application shows that our work has been recognized by the international community. But with this successful announcement comes greater responsibility. After the decision came out, we felt that the pressure now is much stronger and we have a greater responsibility in protecting this natural heritage. We will protect and cherish the Shenlongjia Nature Reserve so that these natural resources can be handed down to later generations. Shenlongjia Nature Reserve, located in the western region of Hubei Province, occupies more than 3,000 square kilometers and features abundant natural resources and rich biological diversity. It is home to many rare species. Experts believe it is an outstanding model for its unique geological environment and biological makeup. Shenlongjia has a unique geological environment, and its biological diversity, abundant ecosystems, and biological evolutions have made it an outstanding example among mountain ecosystems around the globe of the same latitude. It has been a place of significant scientific interest, particularly for botanists. Experts say China has taken strides in recent years to improve heritage protection and now plays a leading role in cultural conservation around the world. But greater awareness is still needed to protect these treasured sites.
Beautiful place, isn't it? Shenlongjia in China. For more on Shenlongjia being listed on the UNESCO list, we are joined here in the Beijing studio, Zhu Chunquan, who is the country representative of China office at the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Nature Resources. Welcome, sir. And also welcome back, Professor Qi Ye, Professor of School of Public Policy and Management at Tsinghua University. He is an expert working on China's environmental protection for decades. So this is something even nearest to your heart, I guess.
I guess so.
So let's start by asking you, Mr. Zhu, about the fact that China now has the largest number of UNESCO natural heritage list next to Italy. What do you make of this fact?
Okay, first of all, this is great news. That reflects China is one of the richest of biodiversity in the world, and have like a unique, universal, outstanding universal value, and that reflects the fact of China has like a rich nature and nature resources.
But having said that, though, the responsibilities that go with it is becoming even heavier, because when you have sites being listed on UNESCO, then it means you have more responsibility to protect it, as the UNESCO would urge those sites to take certain protections, and also those protections will also be examined and testified by experts. So, Mr. Zhu, tell us about how it works.
Actually, nomination of the World Nature Heritage Site or the Nature and Culture Heritage Site have to meet the criteria they call the universal, outstanding universal values. So normally, like need to send a mission to do the evaluation, to do the field studies, and also the stakeholder consultations.
And your organization, of course, has always been called up to form an expert panel to do exactly that.
Yeah.
So who will qualify for those experts? And what are the barometers they would use to examine?
Actually, like IUCN, it's play a role as the technical support body to responsible to send a mission to do the evaluation of the nominated World Nature and the Cultural Heritage Site. The composition of the mission normally include like Chinese experts in the different field, different disciplines, and also the international expert who knows China's. Yeah, that's
in Chen Dongjia's case, what does that mean?
That means invited by IUCN, composition international experts and Chinese experts. They did a mission to visit the site and to do the study, collect the information, and also did like a stakeholders consultation. Then have this mission report as the supporting document for the application of the World Nature Heritage Site.
Professor Qi, it's really your turn to talk, because after knowing the criteria and after knowing that Shen Dongjia has eventually been selected by the UNESCO on its list, it's great news. And yet, what does that mean? The issue of conservation vis-a-vis commercialization or the use of tourism, that has become a very big one here in China.
I think enlisting Shen Dongjia into this UNESCO list of natural heritage sites is really something to celebrate. On the other hand, we understand this is not the only way for preservation, conservation of nature. As a matter of fact, China has the 2740 nature reserves, all nationwide, and that's just about 15% of all the national territory is under the nature reserves. Mm-hmm. So if we can do the conservation to the standard, that would be great. I think the enlisting the Shen Dongjia into this UNESCO site actually helps to have a higher standard, because UNESCO does have this process of verification, reporting, and monitoring. Mm-hmm. And it does not really meet the standard, then you risk to be delisted. So at the same time, we also realize the purpose of doing the enlist the natural heritage site may be different for different people. So we have to be watchful, be very careful to see this not get into a risk of to attract a lot more tourists coming into the places, therefore to bring in pressure for this place. I think that would be counterproductive to the conservation.
Well, of course, when applying for the heritage sites, many of those who are in the application committee would love to make the judges or the panels understand that it is almost like their eyes, as important as their eyes, to protect nature. However, after being listed, it could be changing the situation. So, Mr. Zhu, help us to understand, in China's case, what do you make of some of the other natural heritage sites that has been listed by UNESCO? When you have enormous amount of Chinese tourists that are eager to see the beautiful land and the beautiful country, what is the best way to make that balance?
Actually, based on the experience for the past dominated World Nature Heritage Site, normally significantly increase the attraction of a lot of tourists. So the visitors
largely increase as a result of it.
Yes, that's the normal phenomenon. Probably not only China, also the other countries. The balance of that, actually, the one hand is very positive, raise awareness about the World Natural Heritage Site, and significantly increase the awareness to the general public. But on the other hand, it's really did create huge pressure to manage how to effectively manage the site. So how to balance that, actually, it's have to set aside of the critical, the high value conservation area, not open for tourism, and set only allow a limited area for open for public, especially for the mass tourism.
What do you make of Shenlongjia's case then? At this moment, they do have tourism areas, and they also have ecological conservation areas that is off limit to tourists. But can they protect that? Can they make sure it can continue in that way with increasing number of people very eager to understand the beauty of Shenlongjia, Mr. Zhu?
Actually, after the site dominated, then they need to follow the operational guidelines. So hopefully, I believe Shenlongjia will committed to follow these operation guidelines, and also the World Heritage Committee and supported by IUCN will theoretically to send a mission to do the evaluation whether they meet these requirements.
Right. Yeah. Well, the success being listed on the Nature Heritage list is a big one, and yet it is seen as a start for site preservation, as the status might be degraded or even removed if protection falls below UNESCO standard. Take a look at this.
So far, 2 sites have been delisted. First, Oman's Arabian Oryx Sanctuary in 2007, as the number of oryxes declined rapidly. And the government made plans to explore for petroleum in the region, encompassing 90% of the Oryx Sanctuary. Then, in 2009, Germany's Dresden-Elbe Valley was delisted as the government went on to build a 4-lane highway bridge, a modern construction that UNESCO deemed a failure to maintain its universal values. Generally, before a site is removed from the register, it is placed in UNESCO's list of World Heritage in Danger. There are now 55 properties in the list, with none from China.
What can we learn from some of these, shall I say, lessons we just talked about?
Well, there is a danger, there is a risk. If you don't do well to maintain and conserve the site, then you lose the status. I think the good news is, so far there has been none from China, and that's really good. But I think it's a really delicate balance to, on the one hand, to preserve the natural heritage, on the other hand, to really to control the number of a population who will come in and bring the pressure to the site. I think also the discussion is about this international airport in the Shenlongjia. It's great for the tourist to see the beauty of nature and to learn, and also to facilitate international cooperation, for preservation. On the other hand, it's a huge pressure. I think the people, the administration, for the site will have huge job to balance the two.
At this moment, there have been a lot of debates about who really should have to say about the future of a place. For example, Shenlongjia or other areas that has been listed on the UNESCO natural preservation list. They would say, would that be the local community? Or would they be the local officials? Or would that be the UNESCO that is giving out the status? Or the economists that are on your panel trying to verify how things are? So who should eventually have the right to have a say about the future of this place? Mr. Zhu, I think that's a very interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah, actually, I think immediately the responsibility will be the authority who is really directly make a decision and manage the World Nature Heritage Site. But do have the high-level government, different sectors should also take the responsibility, and the local communities, they are day-to-day live nearby or surrounding area, even inside of the World Nature Heritage Site, they have something to say. I think they need to play an important role. So the multi-stakeholders they all have something to say. And since this World Nature Heritage Site have outstanding universal value, and also the international organization like UNESCO for sure, and IUCN, also other NGOs, civil society, and grassroots organization, they all have like the right to say something. If like do anything wrong, I believe like everybody can say.
And therefore, Professor Chi, will more places, whether in China or elsewhere, be able to weigh? They would like to weigh more whether they want to apply even for a UNESCO list or not, because that means more scrutiny, that means more verification, that means more protection probably beyond what they want to do in terms of their own land. So once again, I think that's an interesting question. Who will have a final say and why?
Well, that is a typical issue
in
this ecological, environmental, and natural resource governance. And in the past, we really rely on the government, particularly the central government, have the final say. And nowadays, we have multi-stakeholders, to get involved in this. Well, whether or not this will translate into a caution in other local government, this is a really interesting issue. I think most local governments still very enthusiastic about the enlisting. On the other hand, for the nature reserves, we do see some of the local government to be more careful in order to balance their economic development and the conservation.
Very interesting issue out there, but congratulations, of course, to Shen Nongjia, at least for this time.
Sure.
And thank you so much to the both of you as well, Professor Chi Ye and Mr. Zhu Chunshan. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You will be able to find us, or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.